Kia ora koutou. Hi, everyone. You know, I'm pretty sure that I've ruined many a dinner party in my time talking about cultural archives, so I'm super happy to be here with you glam nerds today. Thanks for having me. So as Joanne just mentioned, my name's Rebecca Galloway. I've just arrived back from the last 9 years living in the States and Canada, and I'm an arts administrator, a cultural worker. And before I left, I was working here in Wellington for a variety of different organisations. I started out at City Gallery Wellington. I did PR for New Zealand Opera, and I'm back working for them now, coming full circle. What else? I was a strategic advisor for Creative New Zealand and also marketing manager for New Zealand School of Dance. So a lot of my roles have been in that sort of marketing development kind of niche. But I'm also really, really interested in archives, interested in technology, digital stuff, accessibility. So I've been really lucky in that I've managed to insert a lot of projects that kind of touch on these areas into the main body of my work. And there's a couple of projects that I wanted to share with you from my time away. One at Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival in Massachusetts, and the other one at Dance Collection Dance in Toronto. So, in 2010, I sold all my belongings. I packed a suitcase and I booked a flight into JFK, and from there a very depressing Greyhound bus ride into the Berkshires in Massachusetts. So I had a contract lined up at Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival, which is a well-known festival. It programs across ballet, contemporary dance, flamenco, hip-hop, classical Indian dancing. And it's on about, I want to say, like 50 acres in the middle of nowhere. So I was literally living in a cabin in the woods of western Massachusetts for the 9 or so months that I was there. When I first arrived in the box office, there was this sign. And I turned to my colleague Dora, who was originally from Mexico. She'd clocked about 2 years at the festival by this point. I was like, WTF, what is this? And she said, okay, I have some good advice for you. I'll pass it on to you now. It's for free. Don't freeze, don't run if you see a bear. The thing to do is make yourself bigger than the bear. So you have to rise up on tiptoes, put your arms over your head, and just stay very, very calm and hope for the best. So I never had to actually put this advice into practice, but I was actually coming back from a laundry run one Sunday in the closest town, which was probably about 12 miles down the road, and everyone was holed up in the office. And I was like, what are you guys doing in here? And they said, oh, there's a teenage bear sniffing around the cabin, so you might want to just steer clear for a bit. On the grounds of Jacob's Pillow, there are 2 historic theatres, plus an outdoor stage, plus a wonderful archive run by this wonderful man, Norton Owen. So Norton has been at the Pillow for the last 40 years, like 4 decades, and in many ways is the festival's guardian of knowledge, keeper of memory, mother of dragons. So that is Blake's barn. That's the actual physical archive. It's a converted 18th century barn. And during the festival, it's absolutely chock-a-block. There are pre- and post-show talks. There are also sort of more thematic, in-depth discussions that they call pillow talks, wink, wink. And in the off-season, the archive is still very busy running, hosting researchers and writers and academics by appointment. So, I mean, this place truly is a mecca if dance history is your jam. New York Times. When I arrived at the Pillow in 2010, they just received a wodge of grant money to create some sort of digital interactive something or other. And they didn't know what it would look like, they didn't know really what it would be, and they didn't know who it would serve. And leading the project alongside Norton was a very smart woman called Lisa Niedermeyer, and she had expertise across both dance and tech. And at the time, I was working over in the marketing department, and I was pulled in to lend a hand creating some of the user personas for this project, which at that stage had a really naff title like Virtual Pillow or something. It was 2010, you know. There was a hunch by this stage that this Virtual Pillow project would incorporate a lot of the performance footage that was taken at the Pillow. So every year there's professional videographers, a whole team of people that capture everything that goes on, not just in the main theatres, but also on the outdoor stage, at all of the talks and everything as well. So the footage is a huge resource and a massive part of the archive at Jacob's Pillow. And working on the user personas I found really interesting because one of the main questions being bandied around at this time was, in this kind of pre-development stage, was would this tool just be for hardcore American dance history researchers, or would it try and branch out and reach a broader user base as possible? So in that sense, could it be considered a marketing exercise as well as an archival one? I really love this quote from Norton. I feel like it really hits the nail on the head in terms of the approach that The Pillow settled on in the end. We were trying to put ourselves in the shoes or the desk chair of people looking online. Would people really want to look at an entire dance by Mark Morris or Paul Taylor, or do they just want a hint of something that intrigues them? I think it's the latter. And if you say, oh, I think that's wonderful and I want to see the whole thing, well, maybe you should go to the theatre. Snap, Norton. Maybe they should go to the theatre. So the final result is the Jacob's Pillow Dance Interactive, a collection of dance videos filmed at Jacob's Pillow from the 1930s to today. So users can browse by artist, by genre, by era, and the interactive also has some nifty little playlists, multimedia essays, and some lightly gamified elements as well. So as an online portal, it's really designed to sit within that edutainment kind of niche. Slick UX, highly visual, approachable enough for the neophyte, but it has some meaty enough content to be of use to seasoned researchers as well. I wonder if this is going to work. Oh, it's a little trailer. Cool, that's it. So Jacob's Pillow Dance Interactive has continued to evolve in the last few years, and it's received some really great feedback from the community, and also look at this little love letter from the Washington Post. Keep clicking around in Jacob's Pillow Dance Interactive, the closest thing the dance world has to an online museum. The format is irresistible. So after that, I headed north to Canada, where I've been living for the last 8 years. And I worked as a consultant for a variety of organisations, and one of my clients was Toronto Dance Theatre. There they are. The bulk of my work was helping them develop their marketing and development strategy, but also trying to think of ways to bring their 50-year history into the public sphere in a more intentional way. So they'd already got the ball rolling by digitising the last 25 years of the artistic director's choreographies. Around that same time, Canada Council for the Arts, which is kind of like the CNZ of Canada, they'd launched this new fund called the Digital Strategy Fund. So in a nutshell, the Digital Strategy Fund was designed to encourage Canadian artists and arts organisations in understanding the digital world and engaging with it. So between 2017 and 2021, the Canada Council will invest $88.5 million through this fund. So the fund supports initiatives that develop a focus on collaboration, partnership, networking, open-mindedness, and a willingness to share knowledge, results, ideas, and lessons learned, experimentation, risk-taking, and iterative development, the adoption and deployment of available technological solutions. I mean, this is a lot of buzzwords to unpack, right? And it does, for me at least, beg the question of whether it's even a good idea to simulate the modes and methods of the startup world into an arts context. I mean, you can ask a choreographer whether she's employing agile methodologies into her work, and she'll say yes, but you won't be talking about the same thing, So I guess you could say that the Digital Strategy Fund, whilst welcome, of course, has been a little bit contentious within the arts community in Canada, especially given the $88.5 million investment. That's like over $100 million New Zealand. But the investment was undertaken because Canada Council wanted to see nothing short of digital transformation within the sector. it's ambitious. There's something to be said for that. So with my consultant hat on, I initially suggested that my client, Toronto Dance Theatre, apply for a grant to develop a digital archive, like create an API with all the data about each photo or a video or a piece of ephemera in their collection, and then create a web-based interface to query that data. But I was actually beaten to the punch by Canada's National Dance Archive, Dance Collection Dance. They had just been funded in the previous round for a really similar project. So they were starting to hold exploratory meetings to define what the tool would achieve, what the challenges would be going forward. So I kind of figured, why reinvent the wheel? So I joined them for a couple of their discussions, and it turned out to be a really illuminating discussion. I wanted to share some of the topics that we discussed during those meetings because I think they're super interesting just in themselves, and also maybe applicable to some projects that are emerging here as well. So the tool should be a joy to use for as many people as possible. So part of this is around features, right? UX, information hierarchy. The logical first step is to look at existing platforms like Pinterest or Vimeo and ape whatever they do right in terms of like search filters and bookmarks, hashtags, the way that these interfaces organize information. But to me, the more interesting question is more around how to create experiences for a range of users, low vision users, older users. I mean, the 2.0 standards are really great at ticking the boxes, but I feel like new portals and websites should maybe think about going beyond this and try and maximize joy of use instead of just ease of use. Design a contribution process that will intentionally surface hard to access and less visible collections. So this means taking a bit of care to ensure that the existing large actors in the space aren't automatically entrenched as the major contributors, right? Like, so Toronto Dance Theatre, for example, has a really amazing collection, but there might be equally interesting things tucked away under somebody's bed, right? Borrowing from the open source community, its methods for collaboration and participation might be really helpful to think about here. Bear in mind digital frailty. So this is a no-brainer for the people in this room. Digitized items require upkeep and maintenance. It's not a case of set and forget. There's a really good quote that I found. I came across: the digital world has thrust us into a perpetual state of migration. I have no idea where it's from. I just scrolled it down somewhere. If anyone knows the source, please let me know. I feel like, yeah, we're always racing to find, to ensure that the material or the format's going to last. How best to digitally archive physical items like costumes. So is a photograph the very best, most effective way to do that? Would it be taken from all angles? Should it be a video instead? So I guess the thing is thinking critically and imaginatively about this problem and how to solve it. Multilingual projects are tricky. It's true. So given Dance Collection Dance is a national organisation, it needs to service both official languages, French and English, equally well. And I find this really interesting to think about within a New Zealand context. You know, I've been really overjoyed to come back and see such an uptick in te reo fluency. I just remember when I was in high school and I was taking te reo as my language option, and I had a bunch of people question me about that. I think at the time it was the 90s, you know, and a lot of people saw it as an official language. Not obsolete, not dead or anything, but just kind of an official language for official purposes. And now I see, coming back to New Zealand, there's been a significant shift. It's the everyday stuff like bus stops and rubbish bags and children's books, and that's the point at which the language really starts to take hold. And as a knock-on effect to all of that, hopefully we're going to see a lot more portals and websites in te reo in future. There's already some floating around. But I guess the thing is, in Canada, for example, everyone in the digital sphere knows that, as a rule, the French translation is always going to be 25% longer than the English, right? So the UX designers are already all over this. We have an army of translators who specialize in web copy, and within that, their own special niche as well. So I think the next step in a New Zealand context is building that capacity here. How do we go about that? Do we create a strategy around that? How do we all contribute? Next on the list is the interconnected questions of intellectual property, access, and control. So this is a really big, hairy one. When a dance company is invited to perform at a theatre or a festival, there's almost always a line in the contract that says something like, these performances will be recorded for archival purposes. So what happens when our interpretation of the word archive changes? An archive that was once only available to researchers by appointment could now be an archive that's fully searchable by anyone with an internet connection. And there's a lot of choreography out there that doesn't really translate that well to video. Maybe it demands a lot of attention from the audience, maybe it plays with scale in different ways, maybe it asks the audience to focus on several things simultaneously. So how do we accommodate that when we record it so that it's as accurate a representation as possible? Creators should ultimately have final say in the use and dissemination of their work, but there may be cases in which this is legally true, but maybe not morally true, such as like when a choreographer is invited by a dance company to create a new work on the company itself. So it's really a challenging territory to navigate. Royalties. So if a dance company is performing a modern legacy work by Yuri Killian or George Balanchine, someone like that, normally they have to pay a fee to the trust that manages that repertoire. And typically the fee only covers performances of that particular season, not open dissemination online. I really love these questions, primarily because they dig sometimes a little bit uncomfortably into where some of my favourite things fit together. The arts, policy, digital stuff, the internet. It's archives. It's a fascinating world, and I suppose what I love about these dance archiving projects, even more broadly than that, both the finished interactive from Jacob's Pillow and the one that's currently in process from Dance Collection Dance, is that key challenge of taking something that exists in a moment of time and capturing it. It's being an advocate for a fleeting and fragile art form, and that's so worthwhile. Thank you.